Welcome to the Heartland Journal podcast with Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. Please hit the subscribe button and pass it around. Otherwise, we can't grow. So thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community and lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest Jeffrey Adam. Jeffrey Adam, a self-made entrepreneur since 18, overcame dyslexia and ADHD to establish a successful construction business. His life took a transformative turn in 2007 after meeting a biochemical engineer who introduced him to ionic silver, sparking his journey into health innovation. Alongside Michelle, his partner and a biblical scholar, Jeff co-founded Micronic Silver, leveraging prayer and extensive research to develop a unique, organically stabilized silver product. Their company, Nature's Miracle Silver Lining LLC, is renowned for its effective, all-natural health supplements, embodying their mission to offer powerful healing solutions grounded in faith and science. Micronic silver is unlike traditional colloidal silver or other silver supplements because it is engineered with particles so small, microns in size, that they can be easily absorbed into the bloodstream and cells, unlike larger particles found in traditional silver products. This enhanced absorption ensures that the body can utilize the silver more efficiently, maximizing its benefits, and unlike other silver products, Micronic silver lasts in the body for 8 hours. The unique structure of Micronic silver ensures that it does not accumulate in tissue or organs in harmful amounts. This makes it a safer alternative to other silver products, which can build up in the body over time and cause side effects, their website says. I'm not a doctor. As always, consult a doctor that you trust before you start anything. So this is not an offer to buy or sell. This is informative, and we're going to talk a lot about silver in our world, more so than in our bodies. Jeff is incredibly honored that Micronic Silver has been endorsed by many reputable MAHA advocates, including Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Judy Mikovits, and Dr. Brian Ardis. 2 out of 3, you may remember, have been on this show. And I still hold out hope Judy Mikovits will. If you're listening, Dr. Mikovits, invitation still open. Micronic silver is a symbol of self-reliance, an increasingly essential value in a world of uncertainty. Compact, durable, and shelf-stable for decades, it's a go-to solution for all health-conscious families who want to take ownership of their well-being, their marketing team says. The age of blind trust in broken systems is over. The age of resilience and true healing has begun. With Micronic silver as your first line of defense, they say. Let's talk to Mr. Adams and see, Mr. Adam, not with an S, and see exactly what he's talking about. Hello, how are you today?
I am blessed and highly favored. How about yourself?
Blessed and highly favored as well. Where are you talking to us from?
I'm calling from Chicago, or about 40 miles west of Chicago. I don't actually go into Chicago a whole lot.
Are you born and raised in that area, or did you work
Yeah,
your
yeah.
way
I
there?
grew up. I grew up in a town right next to where I am. So I'm not a transplant. I've been here my whole life.
Okay, I was gonna think, Kellogg, Idaho or something where the silver mines are, but okay, we got this. So I was reading in Psychology Today. Yes, I read that to get content for you, dear audience. Something is in the water. Trump derangement syndrome reflects a paradoxical obsession where intense fixation on Trump can impair judgment and escalate emotional responses. The fixation associated with TDS can lead to automatic reactive behaviors that bypass rational evaluation, narrowing the space for thoughtful responses. You believe the cause of America's cognitive decline is much more sinister than some might think. What have we done to ourselves and our drinking water to make us paradoxically obsessed, as Psychology Today called it?
Well, that would be fluoride. Imagine that. Something that is supposed to help your teeth actually makes you more susceptible to suggestion and is used to calm you down. So in the 50s, the military actually used fluoride to help reprogram, quote, brainwash soldiers to get them to function the way that they wanted them to. So our powers to be said, hey, let's put that in drinking water for school children so that they won't be as violent. They'll be more, especially boys will sit there and listen more, and they will take what we say into account and they will behave differently. And that's what we're seeing right now is with this TDS is the reprogramming of America. And this was designed going back to the 30s and 40s.
Real world consequences, I guess. So I read on your website since 1945, the water supply in America has been polluted with the known neurotoxin fluoride. This toxic chemical has been shown in study after study to lower IQ and leads to a host of neurological disorders, Jeffrey Adam said. That's 80 years. Why do you think the NTP report came out now, finally? And for those that don't know, I invited you on because I've been following a recent federal ruling, not specific to California, but in a case presided over by a California-based judge, has ordered the EPA to take action on the regulation of fluoride in drinking water after a lawsuit argued it poses an unreasonable risk, quote unquote, to health, particularly concerning children's IQ. The court's decision relied heavily on a recent NTP, National Toxicology Program, report linking higher fluoride exposure levels to lower IQ in children. Why did it take so long?
Well, that's just because the powers that be are pretty nefarious. They plan things in advance. They don't just hit you with a sledgehammer. It used to be like when they implemented socialism, they would just come in with the military and they'd implement it. We can't do that here in America because we have too many guns and too many people are free thinking. So what they do is have to have a systematic rollout where they can just introduce a little bit. Again, it's a mirror of socialism. When you look at our society, we're here. The socialists say, hey, we want to go here. Their goal isn't getting here. Their goal is moving the base. And then they expand this, and then they move the base. And that's what our government's adopted as a way of performing to implement these things that are nefarious. And our congressmen and senators are part of this. They passed a law, and I can't remember the date of the law, but they passed a law that if you can sell your waste product, it's not toxic waste, it's a commodity. So fluoride is the toxic waste that's left over from the creation of fertilizer. It's 10,000 times more toxic than cyanide. And if you spill an ounce of it on the ground, you're required by law to have a hazmat team come and clean it up. And this is what they got us to put into our bodies.
Yeah, I think they even say on the toothpaste bottle, if you swallow it, you got to call the poison hotline. And if it's in your drinking water, there's like certain levels where don't go there.
Yeah, there's a lot of countries that will not even allow fluoride in their country. That's how dangerous it is.
Wow. Fluoride is a toxic compound that specifically targets and affects neurons, causing neurological disorders and impairments. Studies have shown that fluoride can cross the blood-brain barrier and accumulate in the brain, leading to neurotoxins affect and impacting cognitive function, even causing IQ loss. The American Academy of Pediatrics continues to support the use of fluoride and fluoridated drinking water to prevent tooth decay. Why aren't they following the science at Academy of Pediatrics?
Because they only follow things that suit their narrative. When you look at even go forward to the transgender, trans dysphoria, it affects the neurons in the brain, which makes you susceptible to suggestion. In California, if you're a psychologist, you can't even tell a child that they could be heterosexual. You're required to give them opposite God-related antidotes for what they're feeling and thinking.
So that was the AAP. Why, oh, why is the American Dental Association urging EPA to appeal the decision I described in California, do you think?
Um, I don't know there's no sense to what they do. There's always something different than what they lay out there. They say they want this, much like, again, it goes back to Congress and Senate. And I hate to keep saying that.
Well,
You
if
watch,
they are the root of the issue, we need to deal with that. It's true.
well, that's who creates our laws. You can, you know, bastardize corporations as evil entities. They're not evil, they're not good. Their job is to make money for their shareholders. Their job's not to create jobs so a president looks good. Their job is to perform a function. And if you don't like corporations and they vilified them saying, oh, they're making all this money, well, change the law. A corporation does is what it was designed to do. Capitalism was designed to create wealth for a mass society, for so people could put their hard-earned efforts and make money. Socialism has never done that. Socialism is great at spending other people's money. And this all ties in together. This is all a way of running a society. You get people dumbed down, you get them believing the narrative that you want, and you control them. We can't control the main masses here through weaponry because we have too many free weapons. So they go on the psychological warfare to change your mind. You can vote in socialism, but you always have to shoot your way out of it. And it's the same thing with this medical. Big pharma, which a lot of people don't realize who big pharma is. These are the chemical companies that are making the fertilizers, that are making the paints, that are making the toxins that are causing the disease. And then they make the pharmacia, the pharmaceuticals that they're saying works on this. This is literally the arsonist calling the fire department to put out the fire and go, hey, we solved it.
Wasn't it Rockefeller, John D., that was the one who was able to convert petrochemicals, petroleum into pharmaceuticals so that we ate it as a way of disposing of it as opposed to dumping it in the ocean?
Yeah, yeah. And in getting into what I do with silver, in 1923, silver was the number one prescribed antibiotic in the world. Rockefeller tried to patent it. And he couldn't because it's part of our monetary system. And it's also all natural, which you can't patent it. A couple years later, they discovered penicillin, and then the birth of Big Pharma was there. They've posted a 4,000% profit margin ever since because they control the supply. When the demand outweighs the supply, you charge whatever you want. So they integrated a way of chemically creating these illnesses that did not exist so that they could make the medicines limit the supply when people are getting sick. Well, guess what? We just printed our own money.
Wow. I was being somewhat silly in the opening about the Trump derangement in America, but seriously, the nation's report card in just 2022, the average reading scores were lower by both fourth and eighth grade students compared to 2019. Scores were lower by 3 points at both grades, 217 back in 1992 and 1998 levels near getting about 221, sorry, in '09, 10 years later, 2020. In 2019, again, back to 217 today. So 33 years, no progress. You think it's not bad teachers majoring in woke at Columbia and social emotional learning, possibly, and maybe the water the kids have to drink is the reason?
Well, how did these teachers get that way? They got this way through a reprogram. They went through the educational system. When you look at what happened when they rolled out the pandemic, um, they took the wealth of America, which is people over 68 years old, the retirement wealth, and put them on respirators. That was to steal the wealth back because you're not reprogramming those people. Those were the main people, the main wealth of America, over 68 years old, the retired people. They put them on respirators. If you were under 30 years old, you went through the public school indoctrination system and you bought into the government's going to save you. All that left was people between 30 and 68 years old was your hard workers, your self-employed, your independent thinkers, and your people that own all the guns. So how do we affect those people? I know. Let's shut down the working man. Let's not allow him to work. It takes 75 days to reprogram somebody. They shut it down for 2 years. I still had my construction company during that time. I was offering to pay carpenters $65 an hour, and I couldn't get guys to show up for work. So how do you take back the wealth? You shut down the small businesses. And this is exactly what we've seen. This was a long time planned implementation of government control over American society.
Wow, the Great Reset was like the great reboot. All right, silver. The power lies in its ability to disrupt and inhibit the growth of harmful microorganisms within the body. The tiny silver particles in silver solutions releases silver ions, which have strong antimicrobial properties. These ions interfere with the enzymes and other vital functions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi, preventing their replication and causing their eventual elimination. Is elimination of bacteria and fungi, in our gut important for health?
Yeah, because you have to get those toxins out. There's what's called the Herxheimer's effect or the healing crisis. When you kill off more bacteria in your body you can process, that's how people become septic. Is because they've got all this dead junk in their body. So what silver does, whether it's you've heard of the colloidal silver, the ionic silver, the nano silver, they are basically two electrodes in water, and then there's alternating current. Colloidal silver's arc is here, ionic's arc is deeper, nano's arc is deeper than that. So, and what they do is typically those three types of silver stay active in the body for 6 to 8 minutes. When you take it orally, it's actually absorbed under through the tongue sublingually, and when you swallow them, they hit the stomach acid, creating silver chloride. So those are really a sublingual delivery system. The colloidal silver is a particulate, the ionic silver is an ion, and a nano silver is a nanoparticle. So there are three different sizes, with the nano being the smallest. But all three of them function the same. So when you take them in your body, they're absorbed through your mouth, get into your blood. What they do is when they come into contact with a bacteria, fungus, or virus, they actually disrupt the chemical lung of the single cell organism in a type of suffocation. They hit it with an ionic charge, killing it. Now that silver is trapped inside that dead bacteria, fungus, or virus, that cell, and gets washed out through the lymphatic and waste system. But it really only functions for about 6 to 8 minutes in the body. What we've done with the creating of Micronic silver, we're the only people in 100 years to create a new category silver that's verified as different. And we're the only people in the history of the world to stabilize silver, meaning ours doesn't react in the body like the other silvers do. Typically, silver reacts with light, heat, temperature, barometric pressure. If you look at it funny, you have a different product when you're making it. That's why it's never really been viable in the marketplace as far as pharma goes. With the Micronic silver, we were able to organically stabilize it. Ours is a three-step process. We do things like change the hydrogen bonding of the water before we make the product. So ours is not destroyed by stomach acid. So ours is a sublingual, and I'm going to use the word ingested delivery. It's not actually ingested; it's absorbed through the lining of the stomach through osmosis. And what ours does is a micron is a subatomic particle with a very high atomic mass. So when you have your bacteria, fungus, or virus, you have your micronic silver. When it comes in contact, that high atomic mass actually pulls the electron through the bacteria wall or fungus wall, destroying it on contact. And then ours takes it in. A micron is a form of an electron, means missing a form of an ion, which means missing electrons. So it cannot hang on to an electron. It takes it in, ejects it to the nearest thing, which is a blood cell, giving you energy. That's a battery for life. And then ours is reactivated, goes after the next bacteria, fungus, or virus for 8 to 10 hours. So a comparison that people understand, colloidal, ionic, and nano silver are like fishing. You put your worm on your hook, you cast it out, you catch a fish, you rebait the hook. The micronic silver is like throwing a net out and just collecting all the fish at one time.
Hmm. And unlike many antibiotics, there's a lower likelihood of microorganisms developing resistance to silver, right? Enhancing its long-term effectiveness.
Yeah, you have a higher percentage of that with the colloidal, the ionic, and the nano, but they're still pretty good at staving it off. The advantage of the micronic silver is it's truly antiseptic, means kills on contact. So when it ruptures that cell wall, there's no chance for it to morph and become used to it. So ours works at a different level, and the micronic silver doesn't affect the good bacteria, which the colloidal, the ionic, the nano do affect an amount of good bacteria. The micronic silver, when it comes into contact of a good bacteria, the good bacteria has a protein milk fat layer around the cell that does not allow the micronic silver to steal the electron, so it passes on the good bacteria and focuses on the bad bacteria.
Hmm. Does that mean silver iodide used in the legitimate scientific commercial practice known as cloud seeding is actually a net positive for health for life on Earth?
It could be, except that when they do the cloud seeding, they use aluminum oxide to replicate in the atmosphere to create the rain clouds, which the silver ions will attach to. So nothing destroys the aluminum oxide because it protects it from chemical variants that are going to destroy it. So, that's why when you look at California, they have a high occurrence of Parkinson's, Alzheimer, dementia, is because the aluminum oxide is known to cause that in the body.
So silver becomes more of a catalyst to the aluminum versus silver doing its homeopathic work.
Right. So in the human body, the silver, and again, colloidal, ionic, nano, or micronic silver, they work with the immune system. So your immune system, your white blood cells actually have a little syringe that comes out and sprays an organically made hydrogen peroxide on the bacteria, fungus, or virus. When you add the efficiency of the silver to it, you're creating a rocket fuel for immunity. And there is a gentleman, he's a French gentleman. He has a motorcycle that has no engine that runs on hydrogen peroxide and silver ions. That It's really just a catalyst that makes this motorcycle run through the quarter mile at 250 miles an hour in about 3.5 seconds. And that's what you're doing to your immune system when you add the Micronic silver in with your immune system.
Wow. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but since it's unproven, it's got somewhat of a conspiracy theory or whatever. But you're an expert, so we'll talk about it. We have documented proof. Places like Spain, for example, is being sprayed nationwide by aircraft that are spreading lead dioxide, silver iodide, and diatomite through the atmosphere. We got a guy running for the next governor in Tennessee says radiated thorium is up there. What possible health benefits could doing that have to crops and humans?
I don't see any health benefit to it. Anytime you're spraying something that in the atmosphere like that, you can, put chemical compositions together and say, oh, they do all these good things, but you don't have the majority of those chemicals in your body. God put everything you need in your body for health and healing. When you look at some of the things they're spraying in the atmosphere, they're foreign agents that were never meant to be put into your body, let alone your respiratory system. This is why we see a lot of asthma in our society is from them spraying the crops with man-made chemicals. If it was a natural chemical that was meant to be in there, it would be in our atmosphere. It's not, and you're putting these things again, big pharma making a chemical that they can sell to perform a function that's not natural.
You mentioned God in this conversation. So, alongside it in your intro, I talked about as a Michelle, your partner and a biblical scholar. What part does biblical scholarship play in your studies of silver?
Well, I'm not smart enough to have this. I mean, it is by the grace of God that we have this. God gave us the information. I'm a guy that I didn't even graduate high school. I've got my GED. I've got dyslexia and ADHD. I read upper left to bottom right. So I never finished a test in my life. And it wasn't until I was almost 30 years old that I met a nuclear biochemical engineer and I looked down, I could read his formulas. God had such a mighty hand in this. I had a construction company in Chicago for almost 40 years. And at one point, God told me I'm to give away my company. So I gave away my company. I invented the Micronic silver in 2007. In 2019, God told me I was supposed to give away the company and I'm supposed to be focused on health and healing people. So I gave away the company. And I asked God, I was like, God, you've got to give me a sign that I'm making the right move. A day later, a gentleman knocks on my door who had been buying our product. He was an attorney, stuck a check in my face and said, here, will you open a frickin' company already? Because you've been telling me for years you have a company. So this isn't just something that's been willy-nilly where I just said, hey, I created a product, I want to get it out there. I started making the Micronic silver in 2012. It wasn't 2019 till we opened up the company. And, again, through a lot of prayer, Michelle had studied the Bible in Greek and Hebrew, a bunch of different religions. She's gone to Israel 3 times. And through divine intervention, we came up with the formula and we've been staying true to it. We pray over and bless our product. And it works so miraculously well that we have an 89% customer reorder rate of our products of at least 3 times.
Wow. All right. So shockingly, fluoride is now implicated in those peer-reviewed studies that links it to lower IQ, disrupted neurodevelopment, and increased risk of cognitive disorders. So, what is fluoride, and was it due to the body other than make teeth whiter? And knowing what it is and is a derivative of, how does your silver heal us of that?
Well, ours doesn't really, the chemical damage caused by fluoride, because it breaches the blood-brain barrier and causes neurological function disorder, they don't have a repair for it. The Micronic silver boosts the immune system and gets it to function the way that God intended it to do. But of course, in effect, it's a toxin in your body. They never meant for it to be solved. They figured they would just keep going on letting us poison ourselves. And this is the difference. They're not poisoning us. They're getting us to poison ourselves. So what we've done at Micronic Silver is we've actually made a tooth spray. It's a liquid instead of a toothpaste. You spray in your mouth, you brush your teeth with it. It's got the silver and ozone. You don't have fluoride in your mouth anymore. You're not introducing it into your body. We drink distilled water. There are things you can do. Your body will naturally purge things to the best of its ability to help you recover. The sad thing is when you look at the dysphoria and the mental illness in this country has been on the rise. It's been on the rise about the same level as the introduction of fluoride into our bodies.
So it's obviously past time to reframe fluoride not as a dental aid, but as a neurotoxin hiding in plain sight. Have you testified before Congress, or you mentioned them earlier being somewhat compromised, let's just say? Do you have any support in the government to right this wrong?
I'm pretty much a nobody. I mean, I don't carry enough weight to really make a difference. God just told me to tell the truth and get the truth out there. But we do have, I am close to people that do have some authority, like RFK, through, Judy Mikovits, Brian Artist, people like this that have Sherry Tenpenny, who have appeared in front of Congress that are on the same page. And what we have to do is we have to build this movement from within. We have to get enough people saying, listen, we're not putting up with this. You can really stop any movement by not voluntarily signing on to it. If a product's not good, you don't buy it. We saw that with the solar panels during the Obama administration. How many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars do they give these companies that aren't around because people said it's garbage, I don't want to buy it. They closed up. And that's what people need to do. Get back to natural health. Start growing your own food again. Plant gardens in your backyards. Stop relying on the government because they're never going to tell us the truth. And it's not that Republicans are good and Democrats are bad. It's that these are people that are high on power that'll do anything to retain their power. It's that we need to take back control of certain aspects in our life, like our health, like our common sense, like looking at something and not look at the individual and go, well, this individual did it, so it's wrong. But if my friend did it, it's right. No, our offense should be on the action that these people are doing. And it doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. We should be able to speak up boldly and come out and say, look, this is bad. And if I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican and you say that this guy did a bad thing, I shouldn't be looking at it and going, well, I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican, so, he doesn't fit my political alliance. We should be like, that act and whoever did it is offensive in nature, and we should both be aligned and be against it. And until we start coming together as a society and say, listen, we can disagree, but protect our core values. And they've been really good at stripping our core values and desensitizing in America to some of the outrages like transgender issues.
Yeah, politicizing science was never a good idea because drinking water affects both Democrats and Republicans, obviously, unless they just drink Diet Coke all day long. So why does the US, why do we have this threshold that lags behind the global standards? I mean, knowing what we know, why do US safety thresholds for fluoride exposure remain significantly higher than those in the other developed countries?
We have lobbyists where other countries don't.
Mm.
So these big corporations, they may have meant starting out meant well with what they were doing, but at some point and we've seen a lot of this with companies that the founders of those countries have passed on and the children take over. And when you've lived a life of excess and everything's at your touch, you can have whatever you want. There's you always looking for more. You're looking for the next big thrill or the next big thing to obtain, and they've become such large consumers of the absurd that these are the people that now control the companies and say, well, what's the next step? Okay, well, I'm going to lobby and control my congressmen and senators through bribes and these other things that they're doing, get them to pass legislation. We don't need reform with immigration. We need people to step up and say, this is the law, we're going to enforce it. But you have these lobby groups coming, well, they should have this and they should have that. No, they should fix their country. We had our founding fathers who fought for our freedoms, who died and spilled their blood on this soil so that we could live the freedoms that they thought we were going to get, not to have some lobbyists come in and lobby against it. And suddenly, you can't even buy seeds because they're putting taxes on them on the crop they will create. Or you can't buy heirloom stuff because the genetically modified stuff is the only way you can get it. When you look at celiac disease, it pretty much didn't exist before 1973. Well, that's when they modified wheat and went from 17 simple protein molecules to 3 complex protein molecules that your body can't break down, especially at the age of 33. Boom, there's celiac disease. Now they've got another drug they can sell you for the rest of your life.
They hate us. So what can parents, communities, everyone got so motivated during COVID. We saw Moms for Liberty come out and everybody talking about the CRT in schools and how that was a mom's issue, and they got activated. They went to city councils, they went to city hall, they started saying, no, 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 not in our libraries, not in our schools. What can parents and communities do now to protect public health against, say, fluoride? I wish they would get as activated about that.
Learn from our mistakes. We should have learned when they got prayer out of schools. The main, public didn't think it would ever pass, so they didn't show up to vote. Well, it's funny. The people that are special interest people, they're really passionate about what they do. I mean, they'll get violent for it. I mean, they recruit, they go knock on doors, they do stuff that you would do for marketing. We don't do that in our society. The pandemic was a great wake up because you're really seeing how nefarious they are, they being the powers that be and the people that want to control our society, and the lengths they're willing to go to protect it. We need to pull back to our communities and localize as our communities. Communities used to be really self-governing, self-protected. If there was a bad guy that came in the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood knew about it and everybody was watching him. You didn't have one person make a friend with him and go, oh, he's a good guy, and tell your neighbors about him. Yeah, he kills cats, but I don't like cats anyways. No, it was unacceptable behavior was called unacceptable. Somebody not paying their child support. No, he's not a good guy. You can get people, oh yeah, he's a good guy. No, he's not. He's not paying for his responsibility. You need to start calling people out. And it doesn't mean that you hate those people, first of all. You can love those people and minister them through love and try to show them examples of what they're doing wrong and try to get them to change their mindset. But we really have to get God back in society. And we're seeing a rejuvenation of spirituality and religion. And you know what? I think that God will favor us once again because I think we're falling out of favor. And we kick God out of our schools, we kick God out of our government. What do we expect to happen?
It doesn't get any more local than your drinking water, of course. And so then, living water, not water polluted. So, toothpaste and drinking water are the two main household items that contain it. 90% in the water is sodium fluorosilicate and fluorosilicic acid, hazardous waste known to cause cancer, infertility, brain degradation, and bone loss. Whatever gave us the bright idea to dump it in the drinking water, and how can we avoid those two, drinking water and toothpaste?
Well, that was somebody in government that said, hey, this would be a good idea and convince people of that. And that's what it is somebody, going to sell something. There's in construction, there's your building codes. I always built to exceed them because to me, the building code was the worst possible way you could legally build something. There was a lot better things you could do than what they recommended. But you'd see these companies that make these fasteners come up with new things like, hey, we have to put a bracket that actually holds the deck against a house. Well, if your piers don't sink, it's not pulling away from the house. We have code for that. Why do we need this bracket? Well, a company devised something so they could sell a product, got the local governments to say you have to put this. Now, each one of those brackets was $25 a piece. You'd have to have four of them on an extra. That's an extra $120 per deck. But every single deck being built in the United States now has to have those things. This company just made themselves billions of dollars by having somebody come up with something that they could convince the local authorities that they needed. Well, this is what we see at our government. They convince us that we need to do stuff. There's stuff that they implement solely for profit that has no bearing on our everyday lives,
Huh.
and we accept it.
I found it interesting, sodium fluoride sold in a 50-pound bag can cost as little as $2.41 per pound. 50 pounds of silver is about $38,000 today. So I see why municipalities would rather dump fluoride in water than silver, or is that apples to oranges and adding silver to water supplies wouldn't do any good?
Well, that is apples to oranges because when you're looking at silver, you're looking at an ounce of silver. You know, an ounce of silver could probably treat a lake. So when you look at the cost of the chemicals they're dumping into it versus the effective cost of the remedy for what it does is actually cheaper because you're using an ion. I mean, a little, not even a piece of silver. It's a subatomic molecule versus using pounds of a chemical.
Huh. So you need far less. You don't even need a full pound. Uh, how does Micronic silver fit into the solution of supporting individuals that might be concerned about overexposure to fluoride like me?
Well, you're boosting your immune system. So, while it may not directly affect the fluoride that's in the body, it's boosting your immune system, getting it to function the way that God intended it to. So it works directly with it. You know, your body builds immunity like an onion. From the time you're a child, you've got this little bit of immunity, and then as you get exposures, you're putting a layer on, then another layer as more things come in. When I was a kid, they used to have chickenpox parties. When a kid in the neighborhood would get chickenpox, the mom would take him over there. They'd have everybody kiss the baby that came in it. You're exposing the baby to, just minuscule levels of different things in the body build immunity. They used to take kids after 2 years old and feed them organic honey because the bees would pollinate all the plants around. Your kid wouldn't have allergies. There's certain things like that, and that's where the nice thing about silver, or the super beneficial thing about silver, is it's working with your body, not against it. Every single pharmaceutical out there that's man-made and has a synthetic in it has immunoblockers to stop your immune system from reacting to the chemical they're putting in you, so it can perform a certain, just specific function that is micro related. When you look at a virus, viruses incubate about once per hour. So when you create a vaccine for this specific strand of virus, within an hour it's becoming less effective. Viruses are much smarter than we are. They mutate really fast and they adapt to their environment. That's why when you looked at what happened with, again, I keep going back to the pandemic because we've seen so many violations of scientific law on them. You're creating a vaccine that's single pointed for a virus that's going to mutate. The goal of every living organism is survival. Killing its host is not in its best interest. Viruses mutate to become more infectious to spread, but become less lethal. So they knew from the minute it was implemented that it would become less lethal as it goes, unless it was chemically engineered, which it did have an S-nome versus a genome. A genome is natural and S-nome is synthetic. So there was markers in there that it was a man-made thing that happened. Now you're battling just chemicals in your body that, well, look at Agent Orange. Agent Orange was designed at parts per quadrillion. They'll never solve it. It restructured the telomeres of the DNA. When you look at the mRNA technology, it's a continuation of Agent Orange. It restructures the telomeres of the DNA. They knew this. This was all an exercise to see how far they could push the American public and what we would put up with. Luckily, it got to a point where it got so bad when you start affecting our freedoms in our everyday lives. As humans, we have a need to connect with people. We have to have a closeness. We have to have a touch. We have to have a hug. That's all part of love. And when they tried taking that out of society, we've said, no, we're not doing it anymore.
Society pushed back. Yeah, we used to call that herd immunity. Well, what's a herd? It's a group of people or animals together to ward off all of this environmental stuff. So I've always known silver as the poor man's gold, right? Although
Right.
it's at $48 per ounce now, so not so poor. But it's also antibacterial and anti-inflammatory, has those properties, making it effective for wound healing, fighting infections, and purifying water. It's also used in modern medicine for bandages, and some believe it has spiritual benefits like promoting emotional balance. Ancient Greece, Hippocrates documented silver's use for treating wounds and infectious diseases. The Persian king Herodotus reported that the Persian king used silver flasks to transport boiled water, preventing his troops from getting sick. So, what's the difference between colloidal silver and your micronic silver, and has the price spike made it harder for you to actually make it?
No, we have not raised our prices since we first started making it in 2012. The colloidal, ionic, and nano silver perform the same functions but go a different way of doing it. The micronic silver, again, the activation, it stays active in the body for 8 to 10 hours versus colloidal, ionic, and nano silver is 6 to 8 minutes. It's not that colloidal, ionic, and nano silver are bad. They're just limited in their form and function. The micronic silver takes it to the next level. It's a new technology in silver.
So before you go on, so if some people who take it once a day, maybe with their coffee in the morning, they're not getting anything out of it. It's like vitamin C where you kind of pee it out if you don't like constantly take 5, 10 doses a day. Is that what you're kind of saying? Is like the other versions that people are familiar with isn't lasting very long. You're wasting your money, whereas yours at least has an 8 hour uh, effective rate.
Yeah, so when you use the other silvers as a therapeutic, to give you an idea, we sell in an 8 ounce jar or bottle. Other companies sell in an 8 ounce bottle. If you get sick as a therapeutic, their bottle's a 70 days or a 7 day supply. Ours is a 48-day supply. Theirs you have to take every hour to be effective, realistically. Ours, you take it once a day. And again, if you get a cold or flu, you take it at night. We have people that have gotten food poisoning, take our product, and in 4 minutes, the diarrhea, throwing up, stomach pain stops. The form and function of ours is different than the other silvers. Again, those other silvers aren't bad. If they work for you, God bless you, stay on them. Use them. Everybody should have silver in their arsenal because it works with the immune system. Ours just goes about a different way of doing it. Ours is the new technology, and maybe in 10 years there may be another new technology that's going to far surpass ours. I doubt it because we figured out how to stabilize it without adding chemicals. So nobody has been able to do that yet except for us. And that's how we got people like Judy and Brian and Sherry and all these other doctors to come on with us. That's why our testimonies are so great for wound care, is because it functions the way that God intended our body to function.
Does it work well with zinc and D and C and quercetin, other things that have proven to help ward off flu and cold?
Yeah, and that's the benefit of ours being extracellular, because it's not absorbed into the cell. It doesn't contradict with any medicines or any other products out there. And there's always been some confusion as heavy metals. And go, well, okay, silver's a metal. Is it a heavy metal? No, heavy metals are metals that are toxic to your system, like zinc and mercury. I'm sorry, lead and mercury, not zinc.
Oh, good.
Um,
You got
um,
me nervous there for a second. I take zinc,
um,
so
yeah, no, zinc is good, but zinc depletes the body of copper. So we've seen after the pandemic, everybody loaded up on zinc, and suddenly people's hair is turning gray, and they're having issues with skin drying out because copper is needed for collagen. But you look at copper, you look at zinc, you look at gold, you look at platinum, you look at silver. These are minerals and metals, where lead and mercury are strictly metals. So when they're a mineral and a metal, they're things that you have to have in your body to survive. You literally cannot survive without any of these things. So you don't have to worry about heavy metal toxicity because your body takes what it needs out of them. And silver is one of the things that the body will expel what it doesn't use.
has all the usages of solar panels and electronics, jewelry, and now investment, has using it up taken the supply of silver off the market, making the price, no longer economic for health and water for purification
Um,
use?
yeah, it's getting up there. I mean, every cruise ship uses silver for water purification. Every space shuttle that goes up uses silver to purify water, and silver is the mineral of purity for biblically. So, I mean, there's a lot of tie-ins between what silver does. Uh, but silver is used in a lot of different things, a lot of metals. It's the perfect conductor. Well, copper is the perfect. Silver is the most fluid conductor. So having silver in your system um, is something that everybody really needs to do for immunity. But the price does go up and fluctuate. Luckily, it doesn't take a whole lot of silver to make our product. I think we have a lifetime supply, so I don't have to worry about that aspect of it. Our company, we're very conscious of the environment too. So when we launched the company, we did this. We made sure that we had at least a 50-year supply of silver. So we're not up to society as far as, well, this cost goes up, now I got to pay more. We've taken steps to control our costs to make our product where we can make it on a steady basis, never run out of our supply, and never have to be up to changing prices because we bought at a low rate.
And this isn't the process of like taking a coin or a brick off the market and liquefying it and turning it into powder and putting it into your drinking water to offset things. You have
No,
a
no, ours is 99.99995% pure silver. So, I mean, it has to be a certain level. When you hear of people turning blue from like a colloidal silver, Paul Carlson, they call him Papa Smurf, Carson, he was a guy that did it. The Mount Sinai Medical Clinic told him he had cancer, gave him 6 months to live, and he made silver in a sink. He didn't use purified water. He had well water, so there's all kind of contaminants in it, which silver reacts to. The grade of silver wasn't that high, and then and this is what turned him blue. Actually, he put silver salts and proteins on his skin because he had a skin cancer, and he went outside, which the sun reacts with the silver, causing a bluish gray color. That's actually why they call the wealthy blue bloods, by the way, was the particles of silver that caught in the skin from the scraping of silver off the utensils. And so he had this bluish gray to him. And the backstory behind him is 3 months later, Mount Sinai Medical Clinic gave him a clean bill of health, but he looked blue. Big Pharma paid him to travel around. They told you don't have to say anything bad about silver. They want people to see you because they've been trying to get silver out of society, make people afraid. And so they knew by people seeing him, he never said anything bad about silver. And when people asked him if he stopped taking it, he's like, no, I don't want to die of cancer. He actually lived like another 18 years after his initial diagnosis and then died of a heart attack about 5 years ago.
huh. That's so they were afraid of his blue skin, were they not so afraid of the intake of the silver itself? All right. Well, some foods contain fluoride. They got high levels found in items like tea, seafood, grapes that becomes wine. I know all about grapes and the pesticides in that. And then growing up in California, raisins, of course, are dried grapes, folks, and some salts. Products processed in areas with fluoridated water can also have a halo effect of fluoride in them, I read, and occurs natural in some water, but adding it to municipal water supplies, is that somehow exacerbate the unhealthiness, or are we going to be getting it some way, shape, or form no matter what?
Yeah, because the fluoride that they're creating is super concentrated because they need it to form a function when they make fertilizers. And then they take that waste product out. So the natural occurring, there's literally millions of chemicals um, all around us every day. In the soil, there's so many things that work together. But they're so minute that you really don't have any kind of side effect from them. And I believe that there's also a synergy because they were made by God, not by man. So when you have like plant ionized minerals, that plant taking apart that mineral and using what it needs out of it, I believe the plant took the harmful things to humans and used them, leaving the beneficial minerals in the plant. That is what our body needs. And God designed a whole ecosystem for us. And when we stayed with what God told us, we did pretty well. I mean, we've lasted a long time without the chemicals, and now we see that we've humans have become a commodity, basically. I don't believe that the powers that be want to kill us. I think they want to keep us alive to to retain every penny we'll ever make, which I think is much more evil than wanting to kill us.
Yeah, well, we all live east of Eden in the Romans 3 world, so that's what we're gonna get, I guess. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your wisdom with us. Tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and follow you if you do social media or white papers or anything.
Yeah, so I'm going to tilt my screen a little bit. If you see above me, it says Micronic Silver. That's how you spell our website, micronicsilver.com. You can come on there. You can read about the products. You can read customer testimonies. If you have questions, feel free to call my office. I put my phone number on there. My phone rings constantly. We believe in educating people. If our product doesn't do something, we're going to tell you it doesn't do it. But we're going to offer another product that maybe somebody else makes that we've checked into that are good products. We got to know the owners of a lot of different companies. And we can say, for circulation, you want this product, for something else, you want another product. For brain issues, you're going to want a different product. So our goal here is to make people healthy. Money comes and goes. Yes, we want to retire at some point. Yes, we want to make some money and have a good life, but it's more important that we get the truth out there and we help people empower themselves on the truth and maybe spark that little interest where they're interested in hearing more natural stuff and they take that step to find out that stuff by themselves too.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on with us. Hang on, folks. I will be right back. All right. Oh, did you want to add something, Jeffrey?
Oh yes. So what we want to do for your listeners, again, we want to help people not only get well but save money. So if they go to our website, which is micronicsilver.com, it's spelled Micronic, and then the word silver, silver.com. And under the discount code, if they want to put in the word Heartland, we will give them a discount on the product at 10%. So this way they can save a little bit money, try the products. We just launched our tooth spray last week. It's an oral spray you spray in your mouth. It's our Say Goodbye to Toothpaste campaign. It uses silver and ozone, doesn't have fluoride, helps with, repair gum tissue, fight gum disease, and taste really good at the same time. You can find that on there. You can check out our other products, our testimonies. But we would love to support Heartland Radio in that, and your journal in that. And, God bless everybody.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for doing that. We appreciate it. Hang on, folks.
If country ain't country, then this ain't gonna work. Oh, there ain't no gold in this new Nashville dirt.
Thanks for coming back. As always, please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. Email address is all we ask, and never miss a new show or news from the Heartland that you won't get anywhere else. And it's free. Now, the Heartland Journal News. Deregulation Gone Wrong by Steve. The insane asylums, or state mental hospitals, traces its roots to the 19th century in the United States. That's the 1800s for you liberals listening, when reformers like Dorothea Dix advocated for humane treatment of the mentally ill in dedicated institutions rather than prisoners or poorhouses. By the mid 20th century, these facilities housed over 500,000 patients nationwide, often under appalling conditions, including overcrowding, abuse, and neglect. Exposés such as Ken Casey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1962, and journalistic investigations highlighted systemic horrors, fueling a moment for reform. I actually watched this movie recently, and that's what inspired me to write this article. Advances in psychotropic medications like chlorpromazine in the 1950s promised outpatient treatment, reducing the need for long-term institutionalization. Deinstitutionalization, the process of releasing patients from state hospitals and shifting care to community-based services, gained momentum in the 1960s. President John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act in 1963, aiming to establish 1,500 community mental health centers to replace large institutions. This bipartisan effort was driven by civil rights concerns, fiscal pressures, and optimism about new treatments. However, funding fell short. Only about half the planned centers were built, leaving many former patients without adequate support. Ronald Reagan played a pivotal role in accelerating this process, both as governor of California and later as president. In 1967, as California's governor, Reagan signed the Lanterman-Petrish Short Act, a bipartisan bill that restricted involuntary commitments and aimed to protect civil liberties by making it harder to institutionalize individuals without due process. This led to the closure of several state hospitals in California, reducing the patient population from about 37,000 in the late 1950s to under 7,000 by the 1970s, when I grew up. Proponents argued it ended abuses, but critics noted the lack of community alternatives, resulting in many patients ending up homeless or in jails. Nationally, as president in 1981, Reagan signed the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which repealed much of President Jimmy Carter's Mental Health Systems Act of 1980. This shifted mental health funding to block grants for states, cutting federal oversight and resources by about 30%. Reagan's administration emphasized fiscal conservatism, viewing large institutions as inefficient. By the end of his presidency, the national state hospital population had plummeted to around 100,000. While deinstitutionalization predated Reagan, beginning under Eisenhower and accelerating under Kennedy and Johnson, his policies are often blamed for exacerbating this crisis. Supporters argued he envisioned community care, but inadequate funding turned it into trans-institutionalization, where prisons and streets became de facto asylums. The consequences were profound. Homelessness surged in the 1980s, with estimates suggesting up to 1/3 of the homeless population suffered from severe mental illness. Jails filled with mentally ill individuals. Today, the largest mental health providers in the U.S. are county jails like Rikers Island and Los Angeles County Jail. Critics, including some mental health advocates, argue that while abuses in asylums were real, disinstitutionalization without robust alternatives created a public health disaster. Reagan himself later reflected on the policy shortcoming by defending it as aligning with civil liberties. Trump's comments on reopening mental institutions. In recent years, former President Donald Trump has repeatedly advocated for reopening mental institutions as a solution to homelessness, crime, and public disorder. As of 2025, Trump has escalated his rhetoric, tying it to his administration's crime crackdown initiatives. In a July 2025 executive order titled Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets, Trump directed federal agencies to facilitate states' use of civil commitment laws allowing involuntary institutionalization for those with severe mental illness or addiction who pose risk to themselves or others. This order effectively seeks to override aspects of 1960s-era policies, including the Olmstead v. L.C. Supreme Court decision 1999, which mandated community-based treatment over institutions. Trump's comments have been direct and unapologetic. In an interview with the Daily Caller, he stated, "Yeah, I would consider reopening insane asylums," criticizing states like New York and California for closing facilities like Creedmoor and Bellevue, which he claims led to patients being dumped on the streets. He argued you can't have these people walking around, emphasizing public safety. During campaign speeches, Trump has linked this to broader issues, proposing tent cities for the unhoused and expanded facilities like Alcatraz for violent offenders. Critics, including the ACLU, condemned the order as a threat to civil liberties, warning it could unjustly lock away disabled and unhoused people without addressing housing affordability. Trump countered that modern institutions would be humane, focusing on treatment rather than punishment. This stance aligns with Trump's broader platform, including his 2024 campaign website, where he pledged to reopen state mental hospitals. Supporters see it as a pragmatic, addressing visible urban decay. Detractors fear a return to abusive eras. As of September 2025, implementation remains ongoing, with states like California and New York debating compliance. The rise of psychotic episodes and marijuana's role, examples, and evidence. Amid discussions of reopening institutions and growing body of evidence links increased marijuana use, particularly high-propensity cannabis, to rising psychotic episodes, potentially justifying renewed institutional care for affected individuals. Since legalization in many states, cannabis potency has surged, with THC levels rising from 4% in the 1990s to over 15% today, amplifying risks. Longitudinal studies show regular cannabis use predicts higher schizophrenia risk. A mental analysis found users are twice as likely to develop psychotic disorders. High potency strains exacerbate this. One study linked them to cannabis-induced psychosis, where up to 50% of cases progress to schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Teens are particularly vulnerable. A Canadian study of over 20,000 adolescents found cannabis users 11 times more likely to develop psychosis disorders, with risks tied to young age, frequency, and potency. Examples abound. In a Finnish cohort of 18,000 with cannabis-induced psychosis, nearly 50% later received schizophrenic diagnosis. Abrupt cessation after long-term use can trigger acute episodes, including hallucinations and delusions mimicking schizophrenia. Neurobiological cannabis disrupts dopamine systems. A 2025 study found increased dopamine in the substantia nigra/ventral tegmental area among users with psychosis, a hallmark of the disorder. Another revealed biological links via elevated dopamine, highlighting vulnerability. Critically, cases have risen post-legalization. A UK psychiatrist noted a visible rise in intensive support needs for cannabis-induced psychosis in 2025. In the US, emergency visits for cannabis-related psychosis increased 54% from 2016 to 2019. Interactions with factors like childhood trauma amplify risks. While not all users develop psychosis, genetic predispositions play a role. The trend supports arguments for institutional options for severe cases. Deinstitutionalization under Reagan aimed to liberate the mentally ill, but often stranded them without support, contributing to social issues. Trump's push to reopen facilities addresses these failures, particularly amid rising psychosis from marijuana, where examples show temporary episodes becoming chronic. Yet debates persist. Advocates warn of rights erosions, while proponents see humane necessity. As psychosis cases climb with cannabis use, the balance between liberty and safety remains contentious. That's it for this episode. Thank you, Jeffrey Adams, for reminding us we are what we eat and drink. If you knew you were drinking something made by recovering a byproduct from phosphate fertilizer production, specifically the gases that form when phosphate rock is treated with sulfuric acid, you might not drink it. These gases, primarily hydrogen fluoride and silicone tetrafluoride, are scrubbed with water to form fluorosilicic acid. This acid is then used directly or further processed into other fluoride compounds like sodium fluoride or sodium fluoride silicate. Yummy, right? Makes Diet Coke sound healthy. So why still fluoride the water? Easy money. It's especially stupid when you consider that for many water providers, their treated water doesn't all go to drinking. It goes to showers and washing dishes and outdoor watering and washes. So why pay for fluoride at all? That water when it doesn't even go into the human body. Again, money. The companies that produce the product love water providers, especially cities and governments that are required to purchase their fluoride in bulk. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. Peace in our time and glory to God.
I don't understand
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.